Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on elder protection by faith-inspired organizations. We are recording today's webinar, and in a couple of weeks, the webinar recording will be posted to the CFPB's YouTube channel, and we'll let everybody know that it's available there when it's up. If you'd like to download today's slides, you can actually do that right now. There's a downloads box at the bottom of your Adobe Connect layout, and you can click on that and have the slides downloaded to your own machine. A few other points about our layout here in Adobe Connect. We have the slides in the center of the screen, of course. We have our ASL interpreter, Renee Rose, in the upper right. We have a chat window, and that's something many of you have already been using to introduce yourself, and we'll make use of that chat window at various points throughout the webinar today to make today a conversation. We talked about the downloads box. There's also the EFPRN FAQs and links box, and that's packed with many links to important resources that we'll profile today. So please do scan that when you get a chance. And last but not least, we may have time today to take participant questions. So you can use the Q&A box in the lower left to submit questions that you'd like for us to consider fielding as part of the Q&A segment. Today's presentation is being made by CFPB representatives on behalf of the Bureau. It does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice by the Bureau, and the opinions and views stated by today's presenters are their own. In addition, the third-party resources that are being shared today are not vetted Bureau resources, so please be aware of that. At this point, we'll move into the start of our webinar. Later on, we hope to hear from the Director of the Office for Older Americans to put today's event into context. At this point, I'd like to invite Jennifer Duane, Senior Program Analyst for the Office for Older Americans at the CFPB, to kick us off today. Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, Ben. And here's me saying hello and good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending where you are joining us from around the world. I will turn my camera off now, and hopefully Deborah will be able to pop in. She is our Assistant Director for the Office for Older Americans, and she's having some technical issues. So if she can pop in, we'll pause for her to deliver her comments. And if not, myself or Lisa can deliver them on her behalf at the end. So I'll turn my camera off and we'll get this started.
Jennifer, continue. Deborah's here, so after you present today's topics, we'll
let's just go cut to Deborah then, please.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone today. Today we bring together people from diverse traditions, backgrounds, and faiths. My name is Deborah Royster. I'm Assistant Director of the Office for Older Americans at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Your presence on this webinar on elder financial protection by faith-based organizations underscores our shared commitment to safeguarding all of those who are vulnerable among us. This webinar is a part of ongoing efforts by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to inspire, to inform, and to equip faith-based organizations and others within the faith communities to be able to help your parishioners and the people that you serve in your community. We know how important the role is that faith-based organizations have played and continue to play in protecting older adults and responding to elder financial exploitation. And so we want to help you do even more. Today, we will focus on scam prevention and working with adult protective services. Our conversations with leaders of faith-based organizations have underscored the importance of those topics. The webinar will also share resources that we have on protecting older consumers, and some have been developed especially with faith-inspired organizations in mind. As all of you know, we face a considerable challenge losses from elder financial exploitation are estimated to be in the billions. But we won't shrink from that challenge, and we know that you won't either. So let's all marshal our collective energy, our creativity, and our resources and combat elder financial exploitation head on. So now we'll get started with our webinar. And it's my pleasure to again introduce my colleague, Jennifer Duane. She is a senior program analyst here in the Office for Older Americans, and she leads the office's Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Networks initiatives. Jennifer?
I quickly want to mention that I'm the Senior Program Analyst at the Office for Older Americans in the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I lead the CFPB's Elder Fraud Prevention Response Network initiative and also co-lead the Money Smart for Older Adults program, which I was primary author of many, many years ago. I'm delighted to introduce Jennifer Sperry, who is the Executive Director for the National Adult Protective Services Association, also known as NAPSA. She has 18 years of APS, Adult Protective Services experience in Philadelphia, and for the last 3 years has been serving as the director of the national organization NAPSA. During her presentation on NAPSA, we'll have a special appearance by the Clowder Group on a film studio. They are a film studio that has produced a docuseries called Heroes of Adult Protection. And we'll get a chance to see a snippet of that docuseries, which tells real stories about the positive impact of adult protective services work. We'll hear from Lisa Schifferly, my colleague here at the Bureau, along with Deborah, meaning she is Deborah and my colleague, who will talk about resources. She leads the Managing Someone Else's Money Financial Caregiving Program, as long as the Money Smart for Older Adults Scam Awareness Program. And she also co-leads the office work to combat elder financial exploitation through network collaboration. So she is my partner in making great collaborations work around the country. And those that are already working great, we hope that we are helping them move forward. And then we have Kimmy Moon, who is Deputy Director for the National Center on Elder Abuse. She directs national campaigns, oversees the center's webinar planning, programming, mentors students, and nurtures valuable collaborations with national partners. Thank you, Kimmy, for being here also. We're going to start with a couple of polls. First of all, which best describes your organization? Please select one. I always like to see the horse race here, neck and neck with government agencies out in front. Thank you to all who have joined us today. And then we will move on to the faith organizations. Please go ahead and thank you for this information you're providing us. It is so helpful for us to hear from you. And as a matter of fact, if you would be so kind, if you have other questions or comments or ideas, feedback, anything at all, please feel free to put that in the chat so that we can hear you. All right, so 52% offer programming to address elder financial exploitation. For example, classes on avoiding scams. Hooray for you, and thank you for all you do. And you look for signs of elder financial exploitation in pastoral work. Wonderful. And you seek help from adult protective services and others. So with that, thank you so much for that information. We'll move on. So I guess now what I will do is just turn it over from this Jennifer to Jennifer Sperry. Welcome, Jen.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. So I am so happy to be here, and I was looking in the chat, and I see such diverse audience, which is exactly what we need to see in adult protective services. And I'll talk later about our multidisciplinary partners and how important they are to the work that APS does. And I'm going to be saying APS a lot. I mean adult protective services. That's not the title slide. So just a quick snippet about NAPSA, the National Adult Protective Services Association. We've been in existence for almost 40 years, and we just had our 36th annual conference with about 1,200 attendees, and we have approximately 3,000 members across the country and in the territories. And we really exist to support the field of APS in advocating on public policy issues, increased funding. We offer training, technical assistance, and networking opportunities. And we have a research to practice group that's actually meeting later on this afternoon, connecting researchers with the practitioners to better support and advocate for the field. So a little bit about NAPSA. So what is Adult Protective Services? I could see many of you on here could come and join me and explain this, but basically Adult Protective Services receives reports of allegations of physical abuse, neglect, financial exploitation. We carry out civil investigations. We are not law enforcement, but our purpose is really to offer protection to the extent possible to the older adults or people with disabilities called into Adult Protective Services. And each state and territory has a statute or a law that we operate under to receive and investigate these reports. And we are funded by a mix. It's a potpourri of funding because we didn't ever have federal funding in the beginning. So there's a mix of local, state, tribal, and now federal funding that APS programs are working with. So this is one of my favorite slides because it really gives you the foundation of what APS is and our code of ethics and guiding values. Basically, every action taken by APS must balance the duty to protect the safety of the vulnerable adult with that adult's right to self-determination. That is the biggie. We're not child protective services. Our adults have civil liberties, civil rights, and they retain all their civil and constitutional rights and have the right to be safe. They have the right to make decisions that you and I may not make. Sometimes there's societal norms out there that they go against a little bit. And as long as these decisions do not harm others, they have a right to live the way they want to live. And they also have the right to accept or refuse services, or as I've always said, sometimes we make compromises. They'll accept a little bit of it, but it's their choice. These are adults we're working with. So this slide, APS is, you've seen one APS program, you've seen one APS program, essentially. Variations among the states are really, there's no common definition of who is served or what services they receive. There was a federal rule recently released in May, and there are federal regulations now to increase the consistency, but it's not overturning each state statute. It's really, they're starting very slow with only 15 million allotted for the entire country and territories. But the residents of the victim in APS investigates in the community and people's homes in 100% of the states. In facilities, meaning nursing homes, personal care homes, assisted livings in about half the states. And then the population, you can see on the bottom of the slide, all adults with disabilities 18 and up in most of the states, adults with disabilities age 18 and up in 13 of the states, and then in 2 of the states, older adults with disabilities, and 2 of the states, older adults only, meaning by virtue of age, you're eligible to receive adult protective services. So what can APS do? Let's start with the positives, right? We can examine or investigate all the various forms of maltreatment, the reported maltreatment, but I always say there's something called polyvictimization. So say a rabbi calls in a physical abuse allegation because the person has a black eye and they know that there was somebody living with them that had a tendency to get violent. APS goes out and they also see, wait, there's no food in the fridge, the electricity's off, and there's financial exploitation occurring as well. So that's that polyvictimization, where it's not just one form of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. We can also collaborate with the adults to maintain their independence in developing a case plan or a care plan to remove the risk. And we always utilize the least restrictive alternatives and stay with the older adult or vulnerable adult's wishes. And we really advocate with organizations like faith-inspired organizations and other agencies, because we all have different tools in our box, right? So the faith-inspired organizations can often have a lifelong relationship with families or with the community, and that can really help us work with the clients. And we can oftentimes arrange in-home services as well. So what APS cannot do, like I said, we cannot force services on an adult, because if they have the capacity to consent, they have the capacity to decline services. We cannot involuntarily remove someone from their home. A lot of times we get calls saying they can't live there. They don't have an operating shower, and they're taking bird baths, as they say. We can't remove somebody from their home against their wishes. And we can't provide services where there are no available resources. Unfortunately, across the country, there are many areas that just don't have really great transportation options or other services. It's improving, and that's part of what NAPSA continues to advocate for. Again, we're not law enforcement, so we do not enforce the law, and we cannot reveal the identity of the reporter without a court order. So that confidentiality aspect is something I'd also like to highlight, because when somebody calls APS, it's really, a lot of times they're very nervous about what if the person finds out that they called, and they don't want to damage that relationship. Well, APS keeps that reporter's information very secret, because they don't want to ruin that relationship. But, you have to think about it, because sometimes the person will know because you just visited and then you called APS, so you just want to think about how that might change your relationship. But, get to know your local APS, and I'll get into that later on. They can help you guide the way. So the next 3 slides are myths and facts. Myth number 1 is that we usually APS goes out and puts somebody in a nursing home. That's not true. Actually, I was thinking today, and I was like, you know what? More often than not, we'll have a landlord or a neighbor call, and we end up getting the client an attorney through a legal service provider, and then they end up staying in their home indefinitely. So I love those cases, because they get to live where they want to live, and it supports their civil rights. Myth number 2, an APS worker who investigates abuse can force both the vulnerable adult and the perpetrator to do whatever that worker thinks is necessary. And that's not true. Again, like I said, these are not children. These are adults assumed, able to make their own decisions, unless a court, deems otherwise. And myth number 3 is when an abuse report is made, the main responsibility of the worker is to fix the situation. We are not fixers. We're not the reporter's agent. And we go out and investigate. And again, the APS client is the person we are charged to serve. So not the reporter calling in. The alleged victim is our client. Mandated reporting is something I wanted to run by you, and I realized this slide needs to be updated, because currently 49 states mandate reports to APS by certain professionals, and they're listed here, and clergy may be a part of that, and particularly in the 15 states that require anybody to report abuse. And the stat that needs to be changed is there's about half the states now that require financial professionals, including bankers, to report financial exploitation. So again, get to know your local APS. They can provide training. They want to maintain relationships with faith-inspired leaders, and it can really help their work and support the clients. So APS nationwide, this slide is very thick, but basically we're more similar than we are different as far as programs go. Like I said, the foundation of it is the older adults or people with disabilities, their right to self-determination. And we may have different services to provide and varying level of resources, but bottom line is all the APS professionals are highly skilled social workers, and they are really very resourceful, persistent, and they really try to be as efficient as possible in helping their clients or offering assistance to their clients. So this is where faith-inspired leaders can really get involved. With the multidisciplinary approach, they always, the saying, it takes a village, it really does in APS. APS professionals need to know a lot about a lot because their work is involving people's lives. So it's financial, it's medical, legal, so many different areas, and so multidisciplinary teams are all over the country. And APS works closely with anybody in these teams. And financial exploitation, even, those financial institutions have started coming to the table. And faith-based leaders can come to the table as well. It's just reaching out, knowing where to reach out. And I'll show you a slide later on so you can connect with your APS programs and begin that conversation and just create that relationship, because the best time to reach out is before you must reach out, just to increase your understanding. So building bridges, be proactive before you need to make the report. Find out where APS is housed in your community. It may be an area agency on aging. It may be the Department of Human Services. It may be a nonprofit organization. And find out what the different criteria are for reporting to your APS. Different state laws have subtle differences. And find out how and where to report the cases that you may need to report in the future, because APS really does look forward to working with faith-inspired leaders. And this is our map that's on the NAPSA website with a link to find out, who to call in which states. And some states have online reporting, and that's going to be increasing because that's one of the things in the federal rule I mentioned earlier. So this is napsa-now.org. So now I'm going to turn it over to Joseph Applebaum from the Clouder Group, and he is a social entrepreneur. He's changing the world through film. But and I will touch back with you later after Joe does his thing. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here, and I will be brief because what I'm really bringing to the table here is a clip of our new docu-series. So just a little background. I'm one of the co-founders of the Clouder Group. We're a social impact documentary film company, and we partnered with NAPSA to create a docu-series that highlights the work of APS, the hard work that the APS workers do, and the types of cases that they experience to try and create understanding and perhaps demystify APS to the general public. So we're in production. We've got a couple of the episodes completed, and I'm here to show you just a clip of one of them. And I'm certainly happy to talk to you. I put up our website. You can contact me if there's interest. It's thecloudergroup.com. But anyway, Ben, can we play the clip?
I never saw anybody exploited so hard, so fast, and so callously in my life.
Cindy and her husband never imagined that they would be more than just good neighbors to Mountain Daisy.
She lived there her whole life. That was where she felt safest.
The family believes that it's not safe for her to be up on the mountain by herself, so relatives have moved in to take care of her.
And Daisy couldn't get them to leave.
I'm an investigator with Adult Protective Services. We realized that there was a whole nother story to this.
Her relatives have really moved in to cut down the trees and sell the lumber.
She had been told all we'd have to do is drop a match next to your cabin. That'd be it.
She would get a restraining order and then they could never find him to serve him.
In the fall of 2018, Cindy looks up at Daisy's Mountain and she sees smoke.
I just went, oh my God, there's a fire.
Keeping the nephew away becomes a matter of life or death. Everyone involved heads to Daisy's Mountain to stop him.
Laura could say, he's under arrest and he's not going to bother you anymore.
Our goal is to keep somebody in their home. She got to stay on her land and live her life out for as long as she could.
So that's just a sample of one of the episodes. That's a financial exploitation episode. We have a couple of those. Obviously, that's prevalent in APS, but we also other episodes touch on different types of abuse. We plan on making these available for community outreach and grassroots outreach. That's the way that we get the word out about our projects. So if you're interested, again, please look us up at thecloudergroup.com. I'd love to talk to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. NAPSA is very, very proud of our relationship with the Clouder Group because this is really highlighting the need for APS and our partners surrounding APS. So at this point, I'm going to introduce Lisa Schifferly from the CFPB, Senior Policy Analysis at the Office of Older Americans.
Thanks so much, Jen. Hi, everyone. My name's Lisa Schifferly, and I'm a Senior Policy Analyst in the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. And I want to just start by thanking all of you in the faith community for the really critical role you play in helping people through financial struggles, including financial exploitation, scams, and fraud. Now, my portion of today's webinar is going to focus on scam prevention. When we talked with faith leaders a couple months ago about what they wanted to hear about and what their communities needed most, they said they wanted to hear about how APS works. So we just heard about that, and that was a great presentation. And the other thing they wanted to hear about is scam prevention. We heard that faith communities wanted training for clergy on how to recognize scams that might be affecting their communities, as well as resources to help their communities. So today I'm going to focus on the CFPB and FDIC's Money Smart for Older Adults, which can not only help faith leaders recognize scams, but it can also give you tools to teach other older adults about how to guard against scams and identity theft. So let's take a look at Money Smart for Older Adults. On the next slide, you'll see that Money Smart is a joint curriculum developed by FDIC and CFPB, both two federal government agencies. And I'm going to talk to you about how it works in order to try to raise awareness about how to prevent scams. It is a curriculum that is a train the trainer curriculum that has an instructor guide, a resource guide, and a scripted PowerPoint. So on the next slide, you'll see the instructor guide. You see a snapshot here. And one feature it shows is that the PowerPoint slide that correlates with the content, along with this specific section of the resource guide that I'll discuss in a minute, is all right there. So it lays out for you, here's the slide, and here's what you could say if you were going to give a presentation. And in a minute, I will show you how one of these Money Smart presentations would look like. But first, I want to tell you all about the materials. So this instructor guide includes a presentation planning guide. It's meant so that you can tailor the presentation to your audience, because the entire Money Smart for Older Adults program, it has more than 3 hours of content, and nobody wants to sit through 3 hours of content at once. So it's not designed to be delivered in one sitting. Most instructors or facilitators would deliver it in 20 to 60-minute time frames. And you can pull out the scams that you're seeing most in your community and try to focus on those. So in addition to the instructor guide, Money Smart has a resource guide. And this resource guide is designed for you to hand out to participants in the audience, whereas the instructor guide is for you to tailor your presentation. So this resource guide and all these materials you can order for free at consumerfinance.gov/order. If they're not available there, you can download them as well, but they should be coming back to order if you can't order them today. So please do check that out and order them or download them. So this resource guide, it has information and activities and resources covering a whole variety of different scams. We'll show you some of those activities in a minute, but these are great to order to share in your faith community, or if you have partnerships with senior housing communities, senior centers, or libraries, you can share them there as well. So the way a Money Smart presentation usually begins is with this question: what is elder financial exploitation? A lot of people use the term, but don't necessarily know exactly what it means, or different people may use it differently. So it's good to start by defining it. And generally, we define elder financial exploitation as the illegal or improper use of an older person's funds, property, or assets. And then that results in depriving an older person of access to their benefits or resources or assets. So that's what we're talking about here. And it can basically happen. There are different types of abusers. Next slide, please. And so the presentation would go over, we heard in the video about people who who could be the abusers. It can be family members and caregivers. It can be friends or neighbors. It can even be financial professionals, or sadly, sometimes people in faith communities also take advantage of older adults. This little cartoon on the right is a wolf in sheep's clothing, in case you were wondering. The abusers can also be strangers, and we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different scams that you've probably seen or heard about, including romance scams, home repair scams, and more. So who's at risk? It's really critical to emphasize that anyone can be the victim of financial exploitation. So nobody should be ashamed or embarrassed. It crosses all social, educational, economic boundaries, and it crosses all faiths, which is why we're pleased to have an interfaith group here today listening, because this really does and can affect anyone. So let's look at a snapshot of Money Smart training. I'm going to start by focusing in on the romance scam training, because this is one of the highest dollar loss scams affecting older adults. So let's pretend you're at a Money Smart training and you are in the audience there as an older adult. So we'd start by saying, what is a romance scam and who knows what it is? And then often in the audience, there will be someone, sadly, who has experienced a romance scam or knows somebody who will tell their story. But if not, then you can explain that a romance scam usually starts out where someone says that they love you, but then they start building up the relationship and start asking for money, usually for an emergency. It may be for a supposed medical emergency, or maybe to fly to see you. And then they'll ask for money by gift card or wire transfer, or increasingly by cryptocurrency. So each of these modules goes through what scammers do and what you can do. So on the next slide, you'll see what these romance scammers do. They often ask you to pay by gift card or wire transfer, which is hard to get your money back from. They may also ask you to pay by cryptocurrency, or these days they're saying that, look at me, I'm rich because I've invested in cryptocurrency and I will train you how to invest too. And then when they're supposedly training you how to invest in cryptocurrency, what they actually are ending up doing is teaching you how to send money to them, the scammers, by cryptocurrency. So that's an important trend to know about. If you're hearing from somebody in your faith community who has a new love interest, and they're saying, oh, they just asked me to, wire some money or send some gift cards, or they're saying they're teaching me how to invest in cryptocurrency, these are red flags that you can look out for. And it's really important to flag this for the individual, because a lot of these romance scams, it's very hard for the individual in the situation to see it's a scam. It's one of the scams that's probably most often pointed out by somebody else rather than the individual realizing it on their own accord. So how do these romance scams start? They can start online. Someone might be contacted through social media, through email, through dating apps, or through Facebook. And often they'll have fake photos that they put up. And these are criminals. It's important that people not be ashamed or embarrassed. There are criminal rings that are putting up fake photos and sending them out to hundreds, if not thousands of people. Usually a good-looking person. Oftentimes they say they're in the military or overseas, and that's why they can't meet you in person. So these are some other red flags to look out for. And another thing you can try is doing a reverse image search. If someone comes to you and says they're in this type of relationship and you're skeptical about whether it may be a scam, maybe help them do a reverse image search, take that photo and see what it's associated with. You may be able to see that it's associated with a scam. Now, these romance scams can also happen in person, and that's something especially for faith communities to keep an eye out for. Oftentimes, it may happen after a spouse passes away, a person's particularly vulnerable. They may be in a grief support group, and then somebody preys on them there. So these are important to look out for in person as well. What are some warning signs of romance scams? We talked about some of them when they start out, very complimentary and showering you with attention, but then starting to ask for money, usually in small increments, building up to large increments, or trying to get you to share your financial information. Also, think about how the person's being asked to pay. And most of all, you can advise people, just don't send money to a love interest who you have not met in person. If you haven't met them in person, do not send them any money. And I know this can be hard for very giving people, especially maybe people in a faith community who want to help someone in need. But these are the red flags that can help you identify what may be a romance scam and flag it for them and tell them this is actually a criminal trying to get your money. It is not a needy person who needs medical care. Now, how can you get help for somebody who is involved in a romance scam? First of all, make sure the person stops communicating with the scammer. Talk to someone they trust. It may be someone in the faith community, it may be somebody in their family. If they sent money, it's important for them to let their financial institution know right away, or if it was sent by gift card, then let the gift card company know right away. And they should also report the scammer to law enforcement, APS, and the Federal Trade Commission at reportfraud.ftc.gov. Again, it's really important to take action as soon as possible to have any hope of trying to get that money back. Now, I want to talk about a few other scams that Money Smart covers. Like I said, it covers a whole lot of different scams, and I'm just going to cover a few of them in this presentation to give you an idea. It also covers telephone and internet scams. Now, we're all getting these calls and these pop-ups from a variety of sources. One of them you may have heard of is called the grandparent scam or the family emergency scam. Next slide, please. And what happens in this scenario is someone calls and says, Grandma, I'm stuck overseas. I got in a car accident. I need money for medical care, or I'm going to jail. I need bail money. And they're usually crying to make it hard to recognize the grandchild's voice. But this is just a scammer trying to get money from the individual. They usually say, don't tell mom and dad, don't tell anyone else. Please just send the money. And again, it's often by wire transfer or gift card or some other way where they know it's hard to get the money back. And, what we tell people if they're getting these calls is take a deep breath, slow down, and try to contact the grandkid if that's who they say is calling. Text them, call them separately, or call mom and dad and find out, is the grandchild really overseas in another country? You may find out they are totally fine and sitting there in math class and nothing to worry about there. So another type of scam we're hearing about is the IRS imposter scam. This is a good one to think about in the coming months as taxes become due. They usually ramp up these efforts, and they basically tell you that you owe back taxes and you're going to go to jail, or they're going to arrest you or deport you if you don't pay taxes. But again, these are scammers pretending to be from the IRS. Some big things for people to know is that they can spoof the IRS's phone number. So it may look like on their phone, if they have caller ID, that it's the IRS from a 202 or Washington, D.C. phone number, but it is not necessarily, it is not going to be the IRS. That's not how the IRS operates. They will first send the person something in writing, and if they're thinking maybe they do owe back taxes, they can check that on the irs.gov/balance due website. So one other scam just to highlight is lottery and sweepstakes scams. This is usually where they say you've won a prize, but in order to claim it, you need to pay some upfront fees or taxes or customs. And the big thing to know here is, don't pay money in order to get money. Legitimate prizes and sweepstakes don't ask for money in order to claim a prize. So those are some red flags to look for to help you identify the scam if someone in the community says they've just won a prize or sweepstakes. The Money Smart for older adults also has some interactive activities, like I mentioned before. So if you give a Money Smart presentation, you can use those activities. One of those is a phone scam activity, and it gives you an example scenario of somebody who gets a phone call saying they've won $2.7 million in the lottery, but just need to go to the bank to withdraw some money for processing fees. So it goes through a whole scenario that you can read out to the audience in more detail and then ask them to identify the red flags. So it's a really good interactive activity to get your presentation going if you choose to order Money Smart and deliver it in your community. Money Smart also covers identity theft, which probably most people are familiar with the concept now, just where somebody uses your personal information in order to get goods or services. And there's also an activity on identity theft in the Money Smart guide. This is a really good one. It's activity 3 in the resource guide. So if you order the resource guides, then people will have that activity in the resource guide to use. Next slide, please. So what the activity does is it asks people to consider a whole different list of identity theft protection measures and to what extent they're implementing them in their own lives, like password shredding and a whole long list of other things. And then they can tally their scores and see where to improve. So those are great ways to make the Money Smart training interactive. I just want to tell you about a couple additional resources that are part of this Money Smart curriculum. There's the Managing Someone Else's Money guides. These are great for people who are financial caregivers. So maybe you know somebody in your community who's now acting as an agent under power of attorney or a guardian or trustee for somebody else in their family or somebody else in the community. These will walk them through what they're supposed to do in those positions. It's designed for just regular people that are in those roles for the first time. The next slide is considering a financial caregiver, know your options. Maybe someone comes to you and says, they're trying to plan for when they're no longer able to manage money themselves, or maybe you have someone in the community who you think may start to need help managing their finances. This goes through informal caregiving options, formal caregiving options, and also has a checklist of questions to consider when choosing a financial caregiver. So this is a great resource to hand out in your community as well. And the last one I want to mention are fraud prevention placemats. These were originally designed as brightly colored fraud prevention messages to go under meals sent to meal delivery programs like Meals on Wheels. They became really popular, so we made them as handouts and bookmarks as well. You can get them in English and in Spanish. And as I mentioned before, you can look to order all our publications at consumerfinance.gov/order. They're all free, available for free mailing as well, in English and in Spanish. Again, it's consumerfinance.gov/order. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kimmy Moon, Deputy Director of the National Center on Elder Abuse. And she's going to share some more helpful resources that they have that are targeted to faith communities to help you combat elder abuse in your community.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you to the CFPB for hosting this informative webinar and for all the attendees for your engagement on this important topic. As we know, and we've seen and heard, elder abuse is a serious issue that impacts an estimated 1 in 10 community dwelling older adults each year. And despite its prevalence, it remains a widely hidden and underreported problem. We also heard that elder abuse can take many forms beyond financial exploitation and scams. So it's really important to recognize the various ways elder abuse can manifest and to understand the critical role that faith communities and you all can play in addressing this issue. So the National Center on Elder Abuse, we are a federally funded resource center housed at the Keck School of Medicine at the University of Southern California, and we provide the latest information and resources on research, training, policy, and best practices on preventing and responding to elder mistreatment. And at the NCEA, we really do recognize that faith is a valuable resource to older adults and that faith communities can play a really critical role in breaking the silence and supporting older adults who may be experiencing abuse. Since many older adults, I think up to 90%, are active in their faith communities, it's likely that someone in your own congregation may be experiencing some form of elder abuse right now. So for those who are faith leaders in this room today, your congregants really trust you and may turn to you for support. And this is especially true in marginalized communities, communities of color, where faith is particularly central and vibrant. So faith leaders are really uniquely positioned to serve as a bridge for an older adult or family members to engage with more mainstream elder abuse services, such as adult protective services or other services available within the aging network. So on this slide, I've listed a few resources we've developed in collaboration with our partners at Safe Haven's Interfaith Partnership Against Domestic Violence and Elder Abuse, as well as the National Clearinghouse on Abuse in Later Life. And these are designed for faith leaders and for really anyone who participates in a faith community, spiritual gathering, or congregation to be able to first recognize the signs of elder abuse and offer safe and helpful support and information. And we also want to educate folks about the different steps you may need to take, especially if you're a mandated reporter, and where to turn to for assistance. And as Jennifer mentioned earlier, elder abuse is a very complex issue that demands a multifaceted response. And as she mentioned, APS professionals need to know a lot, and this multidisciplinary approach is really central to the work and our response to elder abuse. So other members in your community, such as adult protective services, domestic and sexual violence service providers, healthcare workers, law enforcement, bankers, and others, all have a role to play in preventing and addressing elder abuse. So we encourage you to be proactive and get to know these partners in advance. Reach out and ask them what services they provide for older adults who may be at risk or are experiencing elder abuse. And if there is a multidisciplinary team or MDT in your area, reach out to them and establish that connection. Elder abuse MDTs exist in many communities across the country, and they bring together experts from various disciplines to meet regularly and offer guidance on really complex cases. So here is a link to our brief that shares more about the role faith communities can play in providing person-centered, holistic, and comprehensive responses to elder abuse within the context of MDTs. I know we're all getting ready for the holidays and planning for that, but I think it's never too late to start planning for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, or WEAD, June 15th. So Safe Havens, our partners, they host the National Weekend of Prayer and Action for Elder Justice annually the weekend before World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which is again June 15th. So we have these non-denominational sample prayers and messages and other sample communications you can post on your bulletin or newsletters to promote justice and safety for all of us as we age. And these resources are also available in multiple languages. So if an older adult in your congregation is experiencing abuse, your support can make all the difference. So again, we really encourage you to equip yourself and your community with these resources to be able to better talk about the issues, spot the signs of abuse, and respond to it compassionately and effectively. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and I will turn it back to Jennifer at CFPB.
Great. And at this point, we have some time for questions and answers. So I'm going to switch to our layout for our panel so that our panelists today can share their video feeds if they choose, along with our ASL interpreter. And a couple of questions have come in. One person asked about resources that are good for training of faith-based leaders. And I think some of the resources that Kimmy just shared are at least partially answer that question.
Great, thanks, Ben. Yes, we definitely encourage you to visit some of the resources that I linked in this presentation and reach out to our partners at Safe Haven's Interfaith Partnership Against Domestic Violence and Elder Abuse. I've also seen SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration, have resources specifically for faith communities that include information about substance abuse, mental health, domestic violence, interpersonal violence. So I encourage you to take a look at some of this.
Wonderful.
And the Money Smart for Older Adults curriculum is also a great one for clergy and others to use to train themselves as well as their communities.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa.
And just keep in mind with that curriculum that it is publicly owned. So if you want to take any of those pieces and put them in your bulletins or share them specifically in other ways, you can cut and paste them into other distribution methods to, I would say, older people, but also financial or family caregivers or yourselves, just as fraud alerts or whatever works for you. And before we go any further, Ben, I just wanted to mention we had a little technical blip in the beginning. Is Pastor Kelly on the line? If you are, would you please open up your mic so that we can hear from you? If you are able to send us a message or whatnot, that's fine. Otherwise, we will carry on with Q&A. But I would love to hear from you if you are available. I know we just got your confirmation yesterday, so it may have been too short. But Pastor Kelly indicated that he may have some experience to share.
Great. We had a question come in from a person who asked, what about a situation where the older person has passed away? Is there recourse? Where should that person's survivors turn to for perhaps reclaiming some of the funds that were stolen and prosecution of the perpetrator? I wondered, Lisa, if you had any suggestions or ideas for that situation.
Sure. Well, for starters, I put into the chat the CFPB's guidance for surviving spouses, and it can be helpful to other family members who are surviving as well. That goes through the steps in terms of handling the person's finances and what you can or can't do. But in terms of a fraud for somebody who's already deceased, you can take some of the same steps. I mean, a prosecutor could still choose to prosecute a case after the person has passed away potentially. So you can contact the local prosecutor. You can still report it to the Federal Trade Commission. And if it's recent enough, you could report it to the financial institution to see if there's any chance of getting the money back.
Thank you, Lisa. Joe, thank you for sharing with us the clip of Heroes of Adult Protection. We had a question early on about when will this become available. So I'm putting in your website URL in the chat right now. Is there anything else you would add and share with that person who's interested in learning more about the docuseries?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the interest. Episodes, we don't wait until all of it's finished to make it available. So we have already been trying to make impact with the episodes that we have completed, and we'll continue to do so. So I would encourage you to reach out to me, and I'm joe@thecloudergroup.com. And we can start talking about it. We would love to see about how we can bring it to your community.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joe. We had a question come in during the presentation on Money Smart for Older Adults, and the question was, are catfish scams a type of romance scam? CFPB colleagues, would you like to field that?
Yes, I mean, they are a type of romance scam. There are all sorts of different twists on the romance scam. The most recent and most prevalent one we're hearing about right now are those ones that involve cryptocurrency investments, where they're either asking for people to send them money in cryptocurrency or saying that they got rich by investing in cryptocurrency and they'll teach you how to get rich too. But then they really are just sending the money to themselves. So there's a whole variety of different romance scams, including the one that the questioner mentioned.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question, and the question is, Jennifer Sperry, perhaps for you. What may inhibit a faith leader from reporting elder abuse or exploitation to their local APS? And what would you say to that faith leader?
I touched on this a little bit because oftentimes the person or the client can put two and two together. So you really need to worry about that relationship. But I always encourage people to, before calling APS, try to talk to the person about remedies before calling APS, because it is a very intrusive service. But, just be aware of the relationship, and even once you get to know those APS partners, either through an MDT or just being able to pick up the phone, they can give you these resources like the civil legal service providers or other types of restorative justice remedies that may, keep APS out of the equation. So I think that confidentiality is there, but these older adults and people with disabilities can often put the puzzle pieces together, know who called, and that can inhibit somebody wanting to call.
Great. Well, thank you very much, panelists, for a great set of presentations and a great Q&A session. We're going to go back now to our slideshow. Jennifer, Duane, I believe you have a couple of additional resources to share before we close out today's webinar. And Jennifer, you're muted, so go ahead and unmute before presenting.
I'm so sorry. Yes. So I just put a link in the chat to our Elder Financial Protection Network resource, which is it's consumerfinance.gov Elder Networks. And that will help you to find a local network. And if you don't have a local network, I would contact the Area Agency on Aging and ask, or Adult Protective Services, and ask if there is an Elder Justice Network or an Elder Financial Abuse Prevention Coalition Task Force. They're called a lot of different things. So just probe and find out, and then hopefully you can join. And if you can join, consider what you can bring to the table. If you are a faith community, you may be able to learn about what's happening in the area, make connections that you can then help your congregation with, etc. If something comes up and you need consultation, building bridges of communication and collaboration is so important in this work. And it doesn't mean you have to go to every meeting every month, but keep in mind that May is Older Americans Month, June is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, although I like to think every day is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, but we do have a focal point on June 15th. And it's a great opportunity to collaborate and get together and, copy and paste material from our material or order material and share it around, or join a senior fair or whatever may be happening. There's a lot going on around the country around that time. And then we have a library of resources, other recorded webinars. And I think I don't know how many, Ben, now I'm losing count, maybe 15 or 16. And Ben, if you could or somebody on your team could throw up the link to that, you have a plethora of lots of different topics and subjects that hopefully will be helpful to you in getting your arms around this very complex, burgeoning issue that affects our older people. And I just want to finish. I know we're 1 minute over time, and I don't mind if you all need to run, but you can come back via the video recording that will be sent to you in a couple of weeks. I just wanted to mention Pastor Kelly. I think we got a little tangled up in the beginning, and As was discussed with him, his broad and deep experience pastoring and serving older adults and their families was extremely valuable in collective efforts to combat elder financial exploitation. In this specific situation, the person who was reporting on this said they vividly recalled weekly visits on Sunday to visit their dear mother for so many years prior to her death on September 12th, 2020. You and Mrs. Carey's faithful visits and nurturing spirits deeply enriched Mother's life and our family as we traveled with her on life's journey. The commitment and support that you and Mrs. Kelly and Mother's church family provided demonstrated the power of faith-based organizations as a critical component of the fabric and safety net of communities across the nation, to protect and serve older adults and to enhance their quality of life. My family and I will be forever grateful for your love and support. So she goes on to say she's very excited and not surprised that he continues, Pastor Kelly continues to strive and serve his community in his retirement. She sincerely appreciates your interest in participating in the event today. And I'm sorry we had a few little blips in that, but here's the message for you. Focusing on elder financial exploitation. And I'll say this on behalf of all of us, look forward to continuing our dialogue on this important issue. So thank you all for all that you do to support your congregations, your community, each other. And thank you for taking on this issue, which is complex and gut-wrenching at times. And we're here for you. If you have further questions or want to meet again on a regular basis, we would be very, very happy to facilitate an ongoing conversation. So with that, I will say thank you, namaste, and hope to hear from you in the chat. We'll leave it on for a few minutes, and if there's anything we can do for you, you'd like more information, specific topics, please lay them down. And then also our Office for Older Americans can be found at olderamericans@cfpb.gov. It's on the screen. You'll find resources at consumerfinance.gov/older Americans. And again, I'm going to mention networks. The more you team up with each other and or with local networks, multidisciplinary networks or multidisciplinary teams, the more connected you will be and the greater the weave of the fabric will be to protect older Americans in your community. So that would be consumerfinance.gov/elder networks. You can start one, you can join one and bring resources to them. You could start a speakers bureau. You could start an older adult ministry that covers a lot of topics. Stay tuned. We're here for you. Thanks so much.